Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of the TTV Podcast. I just want to preface things by saying this is not a normal episode. For those viewing this, you may know this is released on an abnormal day, but that is because we have some special guests from the BioMediaProject that we're going to be talking to, one in particular which we're going to be interviewing, of sorts. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's introduce us. I'm Messina.
I'm LJ.
I'm Kahi.
I'm the lovable Ian.
I'm Nira.
And with us from the BioMediaProject, we have...
I'm Auron. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to get on a BioNICLE podcast before all of them are gone, because BZ Powercast just shut down, and as we'll discuss later on, BSO1 won't let us on. So this is kind of our last chance to discuss sort of our history in public like this, because we haven't really had a chance like this before.
So we're your last resort. I see how it is.
We are your last hope.
Yeah,
We are your last hope.
you guys.
Anyway, there are two others with you, so introduce yourselves, please.
Okay, I'm Trideltix. It's great to be on. I'm glad BMP is going to be gaining some publicity from this.
Yeah. Monocle community's got to stick together. Our fans may know
Sure.
you from AkudaFest and from SeriousMagna.com and whatnot. You were there. And then also...
Yeah, bros before corporate jockeys.
Yes. And then we have one more person with you. Introduce yourself.
Junior Master Model Builder.
Yes, you said your name rather
Welcome.
fat.
Thanks for having me.
JR Master Model Builder. I will repeat that for the fans that cannot comprehend your fast speaking.
Oh, my bad.
Awesome.
These
Oh my
people
God, it's
are
fast.
from the BioMediaProject, and they are pretty interesting people. We're going to talk to them about a wide variety of topics, including their site, plans for the future, some of their history with BSO1 and the other part of the Bionicle communities. So this is going to be interesting. And we have a list of questions prepared, which we'll get to right now with the very first question. We kind of have to ask this. This is a nice way to kickstart into things. And it's one of the most generic questions you can ask, but it has to be asked. How did you first find out about Bionicle and BZ Power?
Okay, so I first found out about BioNICLE from visiting Toys R Us. So I saw the BioNICLE sets in the store, and I immediately thought, wow, that was incredibly creative, right? So I immediately bought Tahu. And I remember opening it and building it right in the mall before even going home, and I was just thinking, wow, this is incredible. I've never seen this from LEGO before. So after I went home, I went online to see if there were any other communities that were discussing this. And at the beginning, there really weren't. I mean, Kanoe Power and BZ Community weren't even that popular in those days, or at least at the beginning. So I hadn't even heard of them. So I never actually saw the merger of Kanoe Power and BZ Community. The first time that I was able to contact any sort of BioNICLE community would be in 2002 when I visited BZ Power for the first time. And I saw it was the largest community out there, so I thought, why not take a look? So in the beginning, it was in 2002, I wasn't really familiar with the internet at all. So I didn't really know that you could join and post and do things like that. So I was just, lurking and reading things. And I was quite happy with that for a time too, because I didn't really have anything I really wanted to say. So I did that for about a year. Then I joined in 2003, and that was when I saw the community really expand, because that was when Crystal Matrix, who was formerly known as Exo Makuta, as well as Siphon. In 2002, he had sort of this inclination to start the site, and then in 2003, it really got started. And it was the first serious attempt at a BioNICLE fan site. And it was aimed at creating a comprehensive fan site that covered both BioNICLE both BioNICLE web resources, as well as story reference materials. So what you see today as the BMP and BSO1, both of those were covered under Crystal Matrix's original site.
Really?
So that was kind of interesting, because it was the first major site that people saw that had a bright future ahead of it. So what happened was it grew bigger and bigger, and then eventually BZ Power noticed, and they affiliated with them. And what ended up happening was that BZ Power ended up hosting BioNICLE Sector 01 on their site. And at that time, it was still known by that name. Crystal Matrix didn't receive the email from LEGO telling them that they couldn't use the BioNICLE trademark in the domain name until 2005. So in the years from 2003 to 2005, they were at BioNICLESector01.com. And during that time, they spent their time backing up content from the BioNICLE website. They gathered data about all the characters and everything. And it's very interesting. If you look at the original site, if you look at, let me see which file I want to pull up. I want to pull up 2002-2.png. Let's take a look at that one. So here we can see the second major revision of his site. The first one was just text on a page. It was very, very basic. This was after he added some frames in. So if you look at this image, you can see at the top we have a navigation drop-down list. And in that we can see home, reference, resource, games, and site stuff. Now reference was what eventually became BS01, and resource is now the BMP. So you can kind of see how ambitious this whole thing was, right? Because at this time he didn't have much staff. Yeah, like I speak about this as an outsider. The only reason I'm talking about this is because it directly leads into the BMP. But at this time, he probably had Swirt on, maybe one or two other people, I'm not sure exactly. But he didn't exactly have a large staff. So this was probably very difficult. And you can see his blog post there. It's torture, I tell you. Yeah. So I guess he, kind of found out what he was getting into. But he didn't really give up at that point just yet. So if we look at the next slide I want to look at 2002-1 now. I know it's in the wrong order, but what can you do?
Yeah, don't worry.
So now you can see
copy and paste doing.
Now you can see in the side we have sponsors. So that was just a bunch of other smaller BioNICLE sites. So he actually took the time to promote other sites beside his own, which was very unique because if you look at the BioNICLE fan sites nowadays, that's the complete opposite of what people are doing. Right now, people are just, trying to keep to themselves. They don't advertise other people. They just try to, make their own effort larger, right? And I found it interesting that he was trying to help these guys out. And, that's something that the other sites didn't really do, which I found very, very good for, such a early start. So the next image, 2002-3. Here we're looking at a page that has a bunch of episodes. Now these episodes are from a number of sources. We've got the MNOG cutscenes. We've got the 2002 Borok animations. We've got the 2003 Borok Kel animations. And eventually he added the 2004 Vaki animations. And these animations are what we now use on our site. So they almost directly transferred. The only ones that didn't transfer were a couple from Jet's Landing Board. JMB, you know which ones that we ended up not using, right?
From who? Jet's Landing Board?
Yeah, we ended up not using those and using a version that had better audio, I think, right?
Oh, Jet's Landing Board had modified 2002 and 2003 episodes.
Yeah.
To make them load their text files because there was an absolute path thrown in the Swift. It didn't work. We later used the original ones. We modified them losslessly so that they wouldn't lose any quality.
Yeah, so on the side of the page here, we see a bunch of images, and let me see if I can bring up the rest of those. So, okay, so if you look at 2004-2, these are the images that he was using on the site in 2004. And he's taken the liberty to blur out the edges, add some artistic creativity and make it look better than just pasting the images on the site without doing anything to them. That was interesting because a lot of the BioNICLE fan sites at the time, they didn't really have many images. Like they were mostly text, and the few images they did use, most people didn't bother to resize them. Most people just used the entire image, and you would just end up with a big background image or a big image and then a paragraph or two below it. It was really the beginning of web design, really. It's it's interesting to see how BioNicle has improved like fan sites over the years, just because the fan sites have learned about web development. I mean,
Yeah.
the internet and BioNicle pretty much grew up together.
Pretty
So
much.
that can tell, yeah, that pretty much tells you how we got into this stuff. It's you know, it's a chicken and an egg problem, right? Because you go into the store, you look at BioNicle, and then you go online to see if there's anything else interesting, and then that's how you learn about the internet. At least BioNicle was one of the first things that I ever looked up on the internet. Like I cannot remember a time when I went on the internet and I wasn't looking for BioNicle. It was always about that, and I didn't really have any other interests at that time. So that was all I had. And then people go on the internet, and then they see BioNicle, and then they go back to the store, right? So it was kind of a cycle in that way. So in 2004, then we had a huge change, because then BioNicle.com removed they redid the entire web interface. They removed all that stuff, and then now people like Crystal Matrix and his staff were panicking and thinking, we've got to do something so that all this stuff doesn't become lost forever, because that was what was really at stake here. Over the years, we've learned that LEGO doesn't mind putting a lot of work into creating things for their site and then removing all that for the next year's material, right? So we had to save it somehow, because LEGO certainly was not going to do it. And as you know, Wayback Machine does not save everything. There's tons of broken stuff everywhere. So in 2004, Crystal Matrix pretty much had all of the stuff from 2001 to 2003 and a little bit of the 2004 stuff on site. And that was the most impressive, because at that point, no one else had done this. That was truly unique. So I was watching him do this, and at the time I was thinking, I don't really have the skill to do this kind of stuff, but I'd like to see where this goes. So I just kept watching to see what they would do. And in 2005, Crystal Matrix renovated his site again. So this would be his third revision. So that would be BS1, 3.0, if the BS1 guys don't completely object to me calling it that. Let's pull up image 2005-2. And here we can see a screenshot of the site in 2005.
That's very good.
And here we can see that things were much improved. It looks a lot different. And in this screenshot, things are a little bit narrower because I cropped things, but it fit the screen really well. It wasn't like fixed with site by any means.
Yeah.
So at the top, we've got tabs, home, reference, and resource. And as I've mentioned before, reference was what became BS01, and resource is now the BMP. So he was still dedicated on making this BioNicle site the most complete BioNicle resource you could get, with all the web media and all the profiles and all the information about all the characters. This is what should have happened, okay? This is what should have happened for the last 10 years. This site should have became the massive, most complete BioNicle site there was. And I think that eventually, if Crystal Matrix had not left, eventually it would have joined with BZ Power, and then we wouldn't have all this fragmentation that we have now with multiple sites doing all these different things.
Pretty much.
Yeah, so here we could see that on the side, we had an image gallery, we had the wiki, a bunch of links, and let me pull up my document here. Oh, and yeah, and this is the time that BS1 changed their link from BionicleSector01.com to BioSector01.com. So this is the first official rendition of the site on their new domain. Mm-hmm. And an interesting thing happened at the same time that the new BioNicle Sector 01 was launched. There was a sort of a great cataclysm of sorts. If we pull up the image, it's the chart, the 2005-1. Yeah, so if we look at this image, we can see that from 2005 on, a whole bunch of new BioNicle sites were created. And the main reason for this, let me tell you right now, the main reason why we have this fragmentation is because of BZ Power. You can see that I've drawn a line connecting BZ Power to the Great Cataclysm, because they pretty much caused it.
Yep.
And the reason that they caused it was due to their policies of not linking, not allowing users to link to other fan sites that had forums.
We agree
And-
110%. This has been a topic of discussion on our channel before. In the Bionicle Autopsy series, this is exactly what we deduced as well. Continue.
Yeah, and so due to this decision by the BZ Power administrators, a whole bunch of sites that were otherwise going to, stay on BZ Power and then eventually, see if they could incorporate their content into BZ Power instead of just leaving, they just decided, we're not going to bother with these guys. They're not trying to help us at all. So they just left. And the feeling that I got from the BZ Power staff at this time was that they were kind of trying to suppress new sites, right? I felt personally, this is just my opinion, I felt that they were trying to prevent other sites from being made. And they were trying to keep their site the largest. And okay, you can do this, but it's a growing community, right? You've got to accommodate the new people that come in, otherwise you're just going to have a bunch of dissatisfied people. So they failed to do this, and the dissatisfied people went elsewhere. And so we ended up with bionicle.wikia.com, and we ended up with the BMP. And interestingly enough, this is also around the same time, 2006. This is when Bionicle launched BionicleStory.com. And this is for a slightly different reason, though. So up till now, we've had all this stuff on the Bionicle website. And up until 2005, they actually did a decent job of summarizing what's happened over the past couple years, because they still want to get people interested in the storyline thus far. And up to this point, it was okay, but now it was starting to get a little long, right? It was starting to become more like a huge, description rather than like a quick summary. Yeah. So they ended up launching BionicleStory.com in 2006 with the intent of being able to separately and more, more descriptively explain what's happened over the past few years. And that was a successful site, and it lasted all the way up until the end in 2003. So that was a good decision on their part to branch things out, so people could actually pay attention to the story. But 2006 was also the year that something tragic happened. So on April the 1st, Crystal Matrix decided to leave the Bionicle community.
Cue the violin.
Much to the horror of Swert and Peckle and all the other BS01 guys.
Peckle. Oh, yeah. Peckle. Yes.
Am I saying his name wrong?
No, you're saying it right. It took me a second to remember who the heck is that, and then it hit me. Yeah. That guy.
Yeah. So I don't know much about the other guys. I know about Crystal Matrix. I know about Swert, because these are the guys who have influenced and who I've talked to. Well, I haven't talked to Mr. Matrix. I've talked to Swert a couple times now, but those are the main two guys. So when he left on April 1st, most people thought, ha, 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 very funny, Crystal Matrix. But he wasn't joking. So that was a poor time to leave, right? So right before he left, he did something for us. And this eventually became very important to the BMP. Because keep in mind, it was 2006. So we're almost halfway through Bionicle's reign, right? So there's 6 years of stuff that's accumulated, and we need to crawl it all, right? How are we going to do this? Well, let me put it this way. If Crystal Matrix hadn't left us that topic with all the stuff that he collected from 2002 to 2005, the BMP would probably not exist, or it wouldn't exist from my creation, because what happened was that it was just too much, right? Wayback Machine, crawling over the internet, it's okay if you just need a little bit. Or if it gets released and then you crawl it immediately, it's fine. Or if it gets released and you crawl it within, I'd say about the last 1 or 2 years, then it's fine. After that, it starts to get really fragmented and stuff gets all over the place, and you're going to have a really, really hard time finding it all. So 2006 was kind of the critical point, because after that, I wouldn't even have started. So when I found out that Crystal Matrix decided to leave, this was the very first time that I contacted Swert. And you know what I said. You can probably guess what I said. I asked him, Swert, Crystal Matrix is leaving. what are you going to do? Are you going to continue with the media gathering that Crystal Matrix has pioneered along with the wiki that you guys now have and is growing very well? Are you going to keep doing that? And Squirt's reply was, well, I'm not really interested in that. That was Crystal Matrix's Biosector 01. So that was his Biosector 01, right? So I'm not really interested. And so from his standpoint, he was willing to let all that stuff be lost to time. I say lost to time because you would never be able to get that stuff back in its entirety. It was pretty much going to be fragmented to pieces. So when I heard that from Squirt, I knew that something big was going to happen, either from me or from someone else, because someone had to do this. Because if you don't have someone doing this, you're not going to get new fans in this franchise. This storyline became increasingly more complex over the years, right? We get new characters, we get old characters coming back, right? So we needed someone or something that was going to be able to explain all this stuff to newcomers who aren't just going to be like, oh, Nuju Hordika, that looks pretty cool, let me buy that, right? So I was just waiting for a couple months, waiting to see if anyone would take up the reins of doing this. And nobody showed up. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll give it a try. So up until this point, I had a small collection. It was mainly music. I didn't really download very much from the original Crystal Matrix Biosector 01 because I wasn't really aware at that time that he would leave. I was totally expecting that he would go through with Sword and make this enormous website. And my plan in 2005, before he left, my plan was to join them. I would have joined them. I would have become one of the staff for the resource section, and it was looking great. The future was bright. I thought this site was going to be amazing.
And
I
then
thought it was going
darkness fell upon the world.
No.
Yes.
Say it isn't so.
What could it be if Crystal Matrix did not leave? And the problem was, he didn't just leave for a few months. He left permanently. And I say literally permanently. He never came back. The only guys who ever heard from him again were from small conversations with Swart and the BSO1 staff. And Crystal Matrix never made more than one public statement to the public after he left. The one statement he did leave was on Easy Power, and that was along with the release of the media archives that he left. I'm not sure exactly what he wanted to accomplish by releasing that stuff. Maybe just want us to have it, but a part of me was hoping that he actually wanted someone else to continue, because if it was just going to be left like this, it would be a lot of work to incorporate that along with the stuff from all the other years, right?
Yeah.
So I was hoping that he was thinking someone else would continue the site, even if Swart wouldn't do it, because I knew that Crystal Matrix knew that Swart would not continue the resource site because they were best friends. As far as I know, they were best friends. Crystal Matrix knew that Swart wasn't interested in the resource section. Swart was basically the wiki guy, right?
Yeah.
So he knew this, and he released this stuff out, hoping that someone would continue, and we did. And so when I decided that I would help continue, the first thing I did was load up free website designers. I looked for numerous ones. I eventually settled on Google Pages because at the time I was using a lot of Google services, and now I still am. The BioMediaProject Google Doc, the place where we discuss and vote and plan all the stuff for the site. We comment on it daily commenting. We work on the site daily, even though people don't see it. Web development takes time.
All day, every day.
So
commenting.
Yeah, so that's one of the major misconceptions about the BMP. I think that most people think we just leave the site as it is and then we come back every few months and we work on things, but we're actually working on this stuff literally every day. There's always at least some communication almost every day, so it's all behind the scenes. And I wish there was some better way I could show people what's going on, but there's a double-edged sword there. Now the double-edged sword lies in that you want to show people things, but you don't want them to be disappointed in what you're showing. So you can only show them things when you have those things developed sufficiently. So even if we have these really exciting concepts that we want to share, we often will hold them back because we don't have much to share. All we have is an idea at this point. And some people want to hear those ideas, but some people want to hear those ideas as well as some proof, right? So that's why we keep to ourselves a lot of the time with these big projects. We don't announce them a lot of times until we have something solid to show.
Yeah.
So back to 2006. Google Pages, that was BioMediaProject.googlepages.com. I consider that BioMediaProject 1.0 because before that I was just releasing a bunch of music and a bunch of videos. But then I thought, okay, I'm releasing a bunch of videos and a bunch of music. What about all this other stuff? I could do that too, right? And, when I was looking at this, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be a lot of work. But, if I don't do this, I don't think anyone else will. So I'm going to try.
The mantle of responsibility falls to you and you alone.
So when I put together the site, it was, I can describe it because I remember this very, very well. It was two red lines. I wonder if JMB remembers this. This is going to be hilarious. There were two red lines, one at the top, one at the bottom. In the middle, on the side, we have a bunch of links. They say music, videos, and games.
Really?
And then you click on one of those, and it brings you to a blank page with just up to 5 download links for a bunch of stuff. And that was what I first wanted to do. I was a complete noob with the
I
web
remember
design.
this site.
That sounds like a masterpiece.
You remember that?
Yeah.
The two red lines?
Yep.
Yeah, so that was, just, like a website test, I guess. I just wanted to see if I could, create a website with a WYSIWYG editor, which is what you see is what you get. No programming required. And I wanted to see if I could do it at all or whether it was just going to take too much time or whether my internet connection was just going to be too slow, right? So I tried that and it was okay. So in 2007, I met Tronek and I met JamMB. And together, the three of us launched BioMediaProject 2.0 on Google Sites as Google Pages was being discontinued. If Google Pages was being discontinued, we probably still would have launched on Google Sites, but would have chosen a better theme.
And the
on
new
the site,
era begins.
Yeah, and on the site, we used a lot of MNOG imagery. And why did we choose the MNOG? Because it was the game that brought people to BioNICLE. It was like it was super colorful.
What else would you choose?
Really engaging. Yeah, and honestly, we didn't really have a lot of choice at that time. There weren't a lot of images to choose from. Basically, we had to choose from the MNOG or TOA and Terega wallpapers and a bunch of that stuff, right? So we obviously chose the MNOG because it would, at least make things colorful. So at that time, we added more links. So probably twice the number of links we had in the first version, 1.0. So we actually had some good content there. We had a bunch of games, a bunch of videos, some music. But, all through this time, the music archive has always been the largest. And the reason why it's the largest and the reason why the version number is so much higher than all the other ones on my site, on the site, is because if you look at the other ones were started much later than the music. The music was the first thing I crawled, and I didn't crawl it from Crystal Matrix. I crawled it myself. I only incorporated the changes from Crystal Matrix later on because I thought, why the hell not? He's leaving. So after that, we added all that stuff on the site. We started getting some attention, but mostly people didn't know what we were doing. Mostly people just thought, another fan site, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But there was something else interesting going on. I haven't talked about the game development that was going on through the years, but I'll talk about it now, and maybe JMB can comment on this too. Through, I would say, 2004 maybe to 2006, a lot of development was going on for the MNOG 2, and later on for the VNOG, because what happened was. One, we wanted a version of the MNOG 2 that we could play offline, and that applied for the VNOG as well. I was actually in on the maybe the first part of the VNOG offline development. I had a version of the VNOG that would work offline, but it depended solely on the cache of your browser. if you didn't have the correct files in your browser cache, it wouldn't work. And at that time, I was using Firefox, so you wouldn't be. I don't think you would be able to transfer it. Would you, JMB? I never tried. Would you be able to transfer the cache like of a browser like Firefox from? Yeah. That's exactly what I thought. You couldn't. So basically, what happened was that it worked on my computer and no one else's, right? So I just did that part as a test, pretty much. It was a proof of concept to see whether you could run VNOG offline, right? So after that, I pretty much left it alone because I was being preoccupied with music and videos and pictures and all that web content. And at that time, JamNB and BioManiac and Takua Me and anyone else you want to mention, JamNB?
I wasn't really involved at that point, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So those guys, they were all working really hard on developing an offline version of the Analog 2 as well as the VNOG. So the version we have on our site, we owe a lot of credit to them for their early work on it. Without their help, it would have been a lot harder for sure. We might even not even have like a truly offline version for it. So with all that work done, BioManiac said, okay, let's do something new. BioManiac at this time, he was a Flash developer. He was working on the offline versions of these games, but he wasn't doing much of the media crawling that Crystal Matrix and I were doing. He was more of a game developer or web developer in between there, sort of. So he decided to create a new project, and it was called the BioEncyclopedia Episode 1, or at least, you know, the first episode was called that. Mm-hmm. So what it was it was a beta test of a web interface, just the interface of being able to browse through the content that people like Crystal Matrix had created. So let's take up an image. Let's take a look at 2007-1. And here we see a bunch of Nuirama on a background, and it doesn't look familiar because it's got some buildings in it. He was a pretty good Flash artist, I have to say. Before he worked on the BioEncyclopedia, he worked on a bunch of episodes. Oh, I wonder if they're lost to time now. That's really, really depressing, actually, because he worked on a bunch of videos. I don't know if JMB saw these videos. Let me describe them. They were based on the MNOG. They had stick figures, and the stick figures were pirates. JMB,
Really?
did you ever watch
No,
it?
I didn't see that.
You didn't see that? Oh, you
No.
should have seen it. They were the best, man. Okay, so these episodes, they were incorporating fan-made characters that he had made. They were colorful stick figures. They were walking around on Matanui, exploring it for the first time. Kind of like how one of the BC Power admins created a site, like a scientific expedition, where they would visit Matanui and see what was going on. It was kind of done in that same style. So you had these stick figures visiting the island of Matanui, and they run into Maku, and they get into all these encounters with the Matoran and the Toa, and they fight Makuta, too. They end up fighting Makuta. They fight with AK-47s. And
Wow.
and like 12 manas on, like literally 12 manas on screen attack them at the same time.
A little
And then
excessive, aren't we?
And they parodied Pokemon, because what else can we parody at that time? And you know, it was like it was showing the Pokemon style menu at the bottom, and Makuta on the left, and stick figures and Maku on the right, and it was like attack and like bite and, you know, all that stuff.
Wow.
And so that was the first major piece of Flash artwork that BioManiac released for the public to see. And if he was at that time that advanced in Flash artwork, I want to see what he can do now. From the research I've done on him now, he's now a teaching assistant at a university. I believe he already has his undergraduate degree even. So now he's a teaching assistant. I think he may be working on a graduate degree. He's if you go to his blog, man, if you check out our website later, check out the links section. There's a link to his website. It's amazing. He's like god level now. He's insane. It's crazy what he can do now. He's written all these papers and theses on light ray development and like animation and all that stuff. And you know what? He even got a internship at Pixar. Pixar,
Whoa.
you guys. He
Well,
could work for Pixar in the future.
that's
This
interesting.
guy from Easy Power could end up in the future working for Pixar.
That's excellent.
That's mind blowing.
Dude, that's
Do you know
awesome.
how hard it is to get an internship at Pixar?
I would
So
imagine
yeah.
pretty hard to get an internship at Pixar. Pretty hard.
Yeah. So after 2007, I imagine he got pretty busy in later years of senior high school and early years of university. So I think he's quite a bit older than JMMB and I. JMMB and I are like within 1 year of each other, and Biomaniac, he's probably like 2 or 3 years older, I think. So since I assume he became busy, the BioEncyclopedia never gets finished. All we ever saw was that image of the Nui-Rama on that background, and we got a beta test, which, probably lost to time, I think, because I don't have it anymore. It was, okay, I'll describe it. It's actually freakishly similar to something else, but I'll talk about that later. So it was a bunch of tiles, and you would click on those tiles, and it would bring you to watch a video or listen to music, and it was very, very well done. You know, it almost reminds me of the MNOG 1 that Lego eventually released. You know, JMB. It's the version with the chapter select. It was heavily similar to that. It was just like that, except with like rounded edges around the tiles, and it was super well done. You know, if I still had those files, I would see if I could adapt them to like what we could do. Right? We could totally do that, considering all the stuff we can do. But you know, it never gets finished. So yet another close to BMP thing that never got finished. And speaking of BMP related things that never got finished, let's open up another image. I'm going to call up 2008-3.bmp, and if you're wondering why I'm using BMP files, I'm not. I hate BMP files. They're too big and they don't offer sizable image quality increase. So 2008-3, we're looking at BioNICLE Metro Nui archives. And here we can see this is from Jet's landing board, and he was also the guy who was working on some of the Borok animations. So this looks pretty cool, actually. If you saw this today, wouldn't you think it was designed today? Wouldn't you think that this was not something that was designed years ago that was updated? This looks pretty cool. So what we're looking at is the Paraka episodes. In the screenshot, we've got a bunch of dates at the top. So he went about doing this BMP style thing in a different way. At the BMP, we do it by content type. So we do videos, pictures, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And he did it by, okay, so it's another way to do it. But we'll have something like that soon. So, you know, whatever. So at the bottom, we have episodes. This looks pretty good. This almost reminds me of iOS.
It actually does.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, like, iOS 5. Yeah, you know, iOS 4, iOS 5, those days. So let's.
I grew up with Mac, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, what was the name? What was the name of their theme? JMB, do you remember the name of their old theme?
For iOS?
For Mac OS X.
OS X.
Do you remember the name? Anyways.
I'm quite sure.
Okay, so the next image, let's look at 2008-1. Here we're looking at some comics, and okay, the height is a little bit, you know, small, but who says you can't adjust it? From looking at this, I can immediately tell you that's the SWF. Can I say SWF, or do you prefer SWF? Okay,
SWF.
So that was the SWF, and that was the version where you click the next button and it brings you to the next page of the comic. At the BMP today, we have both versions, because what the SWF does is it basically takes the Flash interface, it takes a bunch of preloaded images, and it puts the Flash interface on top. So it scrolls through these images, and what's really bad about these SWFs, you know, I didn't really like how they did this. They basically cropped and resized to make smaller these images to make the SWF set a fixed height and a fixed width. So if you try to view these larger than the original, you would get distortion. From any image, if you start making it bigger, you will get fuzziness and you will get distortion. And we know this from working with images for all these years, right? Everyone knows this. So
2001 bandwidth.
Yeah, so that was probably one of the main reasons. So the only other way you could get the full-size images was like early on, you didn't really have access to the PDFs yet. Early on, those PDFs weren't released yet. All we had was scans. But eventually, the good thing is they finally decided, okay, let's release these PDFs that show these full-size images, right? So if you look at the original PDFs from the website that were downloaded directly, they have no distortion. If you see distortion, those are not the originals. And by this time, I say, let me think how many versions I've seen. I've probably seen 4 or 5 versions of the same PDF, and I have to sort through each one of them, trying to see whether it's improved or not, or whether it's just a copy that's been expanded and then extracted, the images re-extracted from the PDF, and then recompiled, because you can do that with Adobe programs like Acrobat. You can extract images from PDF and recompile them. And every time you do that, you're going to see some small decrease in quality, right? So over to the next image. Let's take a look. Okay, so next image I want to bring up is the BioMediaProject logo, the logo with background. Yeah, I'll just keep that up while I talk about the next few things, because it kind of leads into it. So, okay. So around 2008, we were still on our Google Sites page. Still on our Google Sites page. We had analog imagery, all that stuff. And how are we hosting our downloads? We were hosting our downloads on FileFront and MediaFire. And early on, I really liked FileFront. I don't know if they still allow this, but originally FileFront allowed you to upload individual files with a maximum size of 1 gigabyte. And for us at that time, that was huge. That was enormous. So we decided to use FileFront for most of the stuff, and FileFront came with one major flaw. And that flaw was those files, if you did not download them within a certain period of time, I think it was like 2 or 3 months, if you didn't download them, they would get deleted. So for a site that focuses on archiving things for eternity, you can see how that can be a problem.
Just
right?
a little bit.
So we're having something of a small crisis with these files that we actually didn't know. We didn't know whether the files at any given time of any given link would be online, because we didn't know whether they were being downloaded. We didn't know whether they were still online. So that was kind of a problem, right? So in 2009, Tronek decides, okay, I've had enough. I don't want to do all this FileFront stuff and have to re-upload things. These files get like pretty big, like 800, 900, 1 megabytes, and then 1 gigabyte. It's too much. So Tronek decides, okay, let's get a dedicated server and let's get a dedicated domain. So he decides to pay for a server, and we launched BMP 3.0. And this was when go ahead.
Hooray!
Oh, okay. So this is when I would say we had our media probably 80% of what we had of what we have now. So BMP 3.0 had 80% of today's BMP. So that was already pretty big, right? So if you looked at the games page then, JMMB was mostly working alone on all this stuff. He worked really hard on bringing together all these games. Pretty much all the games that you see on the games page were originating from BMP 3.0. That was all his work, pretty much all his work. And we had, at that time, a preliminary test of streaming. And we didn't really know what to do about it then, because, we had huge list of links, and those were downloads. But we needed a second huge list of links. And what were those for? Streaming. So your work becomes twofold, because you need to have separate files for both downloading and streaming, because they are not set up the same. They won't work the same way. So we were trying to, put like maybe a download link and then like a streaming link beside it. We did that for a while. And so we used regular web interface. We had like a big banner at the top. It had Liwa. This was our famous Liwa banner. So we had a sidebar and we had news on the front. It was, pretty basic. and Tronek set that one up for us. He did the web interface for us. So JMB and I worked together to maintain the site from like 2009 to like I would say, yeah, just around 2009. So at that time, Tronek decided that he was becoming busy and he didn't really have the time to, work on this stuff with us anymore. So JMB and I spent quite a while, 2 people, working on this enormous site. And let me tell you about this site, the BMP, you can do this as your full-time job. If you have as many people as you want and you still work on it, you can still add more people and you can still work on it. It's like it's a time sink, basically. As much time as you can give it, it will suck it all up. It's just amazing how much time you can spend on this thing because there's so much to work on, right? And I was thinking about, Crystal Matrix was thinking of doing this and the wiki. So that was just mind-blowing because we've already spent a couple months now just working on it on our own, just the web media part, and it was already very, very difficult and very, very time-consuming. And Crystal Matrix wanted to do this and the wiki at once. And I don't think his staff was even as large as we ended up having. So you can see how insanely ambitious Crystal Matrix was. If it was me, I would not have done that. So at that time, we ended up gaining one more new member. His name was Nat, and he joined us in, I would say, late 2009, early 2010, about.
Was Nat a he?
Nat, yeah, Nat. Do you think that time is accurate, JMNB?
What time was it?
That time, late 2009 to 2010, I think is when Nat joined us.
Yeah, that seems about right.
I think so. So it was 2009, and we were getting these new staff members, and Nat was one of the first, and the other one was Mintz. So Mintz 97, yeah, Mintz. He was very interested to join our site, and he joined us very early on. So today he serves as one of our game developers, game rippers. He does some minor crawling for the other stuff, but mostly he's working on the games. So we had him, and we had Nat, and we had Tronek going away. And at that time, we were thinking of revamping the site at this point. We were doing this for a while. We had all this stuff. It was very deceptive because you would look at this site and think, oh, look at this site. It's so simple. Nothing good could possibly come out of this site, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so it was deceptive because we had so much stuff. Like, this was, as I said, 80% of what we have now. So it was enormous. So it was actually a really good site except for the web interface. So we wanted to prove to people that we had the development skills to do something better and, add street cred,
If I recall, Tronek actually broke the site, and that was that was
the turning point?
That was the tipping point, yeah.
Oh, right. So we ended up debating. We had this debate on what we should do next. Because we had 2 web developers at that time. Our 2 web developers were Nat and Tronek. And Nat was saying, oh, I can do all this for you. I can make this new site. It'll be awesome. And Nat was saying, oh, I can also do this. I can set up a Drupal installation, and I can set up a theme and everything. So we held a vote, but before we could conclude that vote, Tronek said, no, guys, I can't do this anymore. It's just too much work, and I'm getting busy. So we said, all right, we'll miss you, Tronek. See you around. And so we left, and so we ended up going with Nat's decision, which was to use Drupal. And looking back, it was the best thing we could have done at that point. Like we didn't really know about any other web CMSs that we could use that were for free. We just saw what he had to offer, and he was willing to do all the work. So why wouldn't you do it, right?
Yeah.
So we did it, and that was what we launched as BMP 4.0. So now we're getting into the really, really interesting things because the content that we put on BMP 4.0. It ended up leading us into the development of the Metro UI interface. So with BMP 4.0, like at the beginning, we just set up all the old stuff that we had from BMP 3.0. But since we had more resources from Drupal that were available to us, and we had a more reliable streaming system. We could actually stream stuff now. We had a player. We had an actual player that you could stream stuff from. It wasn't direct links anymore.
Amazing.
We were getting web development.
Amazing.
Web development, you guys. Yeah, so we set up our streaming service. We added some music, we added some videos, and that was a really good player because you could stream a whole bunch of stuff from those folders. I can't remember the name anymore. It was like media something. Media, I can't even remember. So we had one player, just one, and we had folders that you could click and look through all our content. It was very, very organized, very, very neat. So it was very easy to use. And then after we set up all our old stuff, we decided to look to the future, as we always do around here, and we were thinking, what can we do next? What can we do to improve the look of the site? Because remember, at this time, we just copied everything from BMP 3.0, which means lists of links and not much else, right?
Huh.
So we get news, and we got lists of links, and we got sidebar. That's it. And the team and I, we had a discussion. We thought, okay, we were thinking we might do images for each piece of content, but some staff would say like, oh, images for every single piece of content? Auron, do you know how much content we have? Right? So it did sound like a whole lot of work, right? So we were very hesitant about doing this. But then I knew if we did do it, then we would never progress from just lists of links. People don't want to look at lists of links, I tell you. It's like reading Yahoo from like the 2000s. It's like just a directory. Nobody wants to do that. Okay, so we decided it was mandatory whether we wanted to do it or not. We just had to.
Yeah.
So we started looking for ways we could do this without first making it look messy, and two, without having us to do a whole lot of work. So we needed two things for each piece of content, really. We needed an image, and we needed a description. And okay, if you're a web developer, you can also say, okay, you also need a alt description for the image. In case the image doesn't load, you can still see what the image description is, right?
Yeah.
But we weren't really concerned about that at that time. So we took a look around at general UI. It wasn't even just like web development. It was everything. I looked at a whole bunch of interfaces. I looked at iOS. I looked at Windows. And at that time, the one thing that stood out to me that was very unique was the Zune. Yes, the Zune. So,
Oh Lord.
so if you looked at the Zune, it had huge text on very, very high contrast. It was like white text or black text on white. It was very, very clear. It was very sharp. It was very beautiful, in my opinion. And in terms of images, it had these tiles, and the tiles were arranged in grids. And most of the scrolling was done horizontally, but we weren't really cluing onto that yet. So most of the scrolling, when you scrolled, it would scroll an entire page at once. So it's kind of like how Windows Phone is now. Basically, Windows Phone today is the Zune interface, but just improved. They haven't really done anything different. It's pretty much Zune. Zune is what became today's Windows Phone. It's crazy, right? So with that in mind, I took a look to see what concepts I could integrate from that sort of Zune interface, and I was really interested in those tiles. Those tiles look really neat to me because we could arrange them in grids, and we wouldn't have all these misshapen, different sized images. So to me, that was the way of the future. And I remember holding a vote on our Google Doc voting page, and I was proposing that we use this system. And at the BMP, we're democracy based. We like everyone to have their say if they actually get some stuff done. If they just sit around doing nothing, they're probably not gonna get their chance to vote. But if they are able, then we vote on any issue that we want to solve or address, and then we gather up all the votes and see what wins, right? So we ended up voting yes to using the Zune interface. We didn't really refer to it as the Zune interface, though. At the beginning, it was mostly Metro UI, right? So we did our tests of the tiles. We did our first test of the tiles before BS01 did. So what we did was we took images, we resized them to a common size, And I wonder what the resolution was. I wonder if I can remember. I think it was like 232 by 100 something. That's all I can remember.
Huh.
JMB, you got it? Did you remember
I
the
don't
original
remember the
resolution of
original
our
ones.
first testing tiles?
I don't remember what it was.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it was 232 by something. So we had these tiles, and we needed some way to put text on them. We needed the description for the tile, right? So it was very labor intensive because the only way we could think of at that time to do it was to type it on in Paint or Photoshop or whatever, and then just use that entire tile without being able to change the description. So every time we needed to update what it said, we needed to redo the tile, and that was very, very time consuming. So the first tiles we tested were, of course, the games, because most people come to our site to play games, and that was what drew attention, right? So we did game styles, and at this time, it was still vertical scrolling, because basically all we did was remove the lists of links and replace them with tiles. And since we had to do each tile was not automatically created. Each tile was very labor intensively created manually. So we would take huge amounts of time, enormous, to create these tiles, and then we display them on the page, and it would just look like we had, switched everything out. We had no more lists of links. And for me, that was huge. Not having those lists of download links was the first step towards the future from what I could see. Because you could finally navigate the site without having to, read so much. It was, pretty silly at that point.
Yep.
So at that point, we were like, okay, so we're on BMP 4.0. What can we do to make the site better even from now? So we started doing planning for the future. And this is the point when Nat decided, he also decided to leave. So then we were out of a web developer, right? We need at least one web developer who knows the site inside out, because that's the guy we trust to be able to take a look at the site or troubleshoot issues. And we really relied on Tronik for that at first. And then when Nat took over with Drupal, we relied on Nat. And the thing with Drupal, it's very complicated. It's easy to use if you've had some experience with before, because it's all WYSIWYG. It's buttons, and you click and you set all these options. But some of us felt there were too many options. It was very, 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 very intensive to set up all these options for everything. And sometimes things would go wrong, or with the site, like in terms of the layout, like things would shift to the left or things would shift to the right, and we wouldn't know what was going on. And so it was not easy to work on, because we didn't really know Drupal that well. Nat was the guy with Drupal. So we decided we had to change things, and we needed someone else to be able to manage the site so that we knew what was going on at all times.
Yeah.
So we started taking a look at some concepts of what the site could look like. If the idea was this: if I or any other staff member could design the site to look ideally like the way I wanted to look, what would it look like? Like, think of any concept you can think of. If you want the site to look like that, we would do it.
Yeah.
So that was the idea. So we wanted to continue with doing the Metro UI tiles, because we found those tiles very impressive visually. If you had a whole page of tiles, it looked really good. So we wanted to continue with that, and we wanted a dark background. And why a dark background? Because with the tiles, it was similar to the 2001 to 2003 BioNicle homepage. You had 3 tiles at the top on that homepage. You had news stories, and you had some drop-down lists right below them, and then you had a couple more images. I think it was like 3 or 4 images right below that. So it was also close to the look of those tiles. So in order to emulate the BioNicle site even more, we decided to use the dark background. And then another thing we wanted to figure out was what we want to do with the homepage and what we want to do with the scrolling. Because on BMP 4.0, we had vertical scrolling. But since we had the chance to start anew, we thought, okay, so why don't we take a look and see what we can do, see if we can make this better. So JMB created some really, really good mock-ups. and he asked me, what are the specs of the actual Windows 8 tiles? Because at that time, Windows 8 development was just getting started, and a couple of builds were being released. And I tried the original Windows 8 developer preview, and I thought, hey, this looks pretty interesting. I've never seen this before. Let's take a look at this, and let's see if we can incorporate these themes into our site. So I gave JMB the exact pixel-to-pixel widths and heights of the tiles and the spaces in between them, and you put together these pixel-perfect mockups. So I thought, wow, you've done all this yourself. It looks amazing. So we held the vote. The vote was, should we continue on using Drupal and switch to a new theme in order to get something new, or should we use JMB's new WordPress theme and move to WordPress and do everything all over again, nuke all the progress we've made? And we all voted to go with the new WordPress design because it was just better. I mean, it was better in every way. It was easier to manage. There were less complicated options to configure. It was something that JMB already had some experience with. So
if I could chime in a bit there.
Go ahead. Yeah.
At the time, I had gotten a new job in which we used WordPress. Every site we made was on WordPress, so it was a CMS I knew quite well.
Yeah, so
versus Drupal, which we were lost.
Yeah, we were totally lost. Even though we pretty much had some experience with web development, we had some experience with media, we were still lost. It was pretty complicated still. So we moved to WordPress, and at the beginning, we had to spend a lot of time rebuilding everything, and the biggest problem for us was the streaming, because we had to get everything streaming again, and that's a lot of work on JMB's part and Mint's part. So once we had everything streaming, we were thinking, okay, so now we've got this new site, we've got all these tiles, so what can we do to draw more people to the site, right? So we decided to put out a call for more staff members, because if you have more staff members, then you can start more exciting projects and you can do more cool things. So we ended up getting maybe like 7 to 8 staff members. The staff members around the BMP, there's a staffing issue here, and the staffing issue is deeper than just we don't have enough staff. Though it's true, we don't have enough staff. The issue is that there's this syndrome, which I call BMP staff member syndrome.
How creative.
Or BMP disappearing syndrome.
I bet that took you a lot of time.
So what happens is we get new staff members, and they're all, they're so enthusiastic. They're like, we want to help. So okay, we're like, okay, we'll let you help. But when we let them help, we don't order people around. This is not how we work. Basically, we have to-do lists, and we arrange those to-do lists in set lists so that when we complete all the tasks on that list, we can say, okay, so we've done all this work, we can move on to the next milestone. And we call these milestones like 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, etc. So with these milestones, you'd have the big list, the master list, which had everything on it that we need to complete for the next milestone. And then you'd also have 6-week lists, and we called this the 6-week plan. So on this list, you'd have all the tasks that a staff member would complete during a 6-week period. And the reason why we had this was during the 3.0 days, we had this huge problem with tasks not being completed very oftenly. And the reason why that was the case was because whenever we added tasks, we just added them to the main list. We didn't separate the lists at all. So it would feel like, okay, we just did all this work, and now we're adding all these new tasks. It feels like we're not getting anywhere. So we decided to separate it so we could see our progress over a shorter period of time than just a year. Because up to this point, we pretty much completed one milestone every year. Milestones take a lot of time because we have to change all these things. We're starting new projects. Every milestone has new features for the site, and every milestone has new releases of pretty much every content archive that we have. So it's a lot of work, so we split it up into one milestone per year, and up to this point, we've been successful at maintaining that cadence. So we split up into these lists to help the new staff members, organize their tasks. And there's this thing with self-motivation, because if you join the BMP staff and you're not self-motivated, you're not going to do anything. And that's a problem because we need to have some progress over time in order to achieve our goals, because we set lofty goals. And the reason why we set lofty goals is because we want a great looking site. We have huge plans for the future and we want to reach those goals.
Yeah.
So we need to get some work done eventually, right?
Mhm.
So they would join, and then we would tell them, here's how it works, here's how the system works with all these to-do lists. And then they'd sign up for a few. But this is the problem. See, because nobody was telling them what to do, nobody was ordering them around, telling them to do this or that, they eventually just stopped doing things because they know that they need to sign up for those things themselves. But either they don't want to ask us for help, or they're too busy, or whatever reason, they just eventually stop doing things. And after they stop doing things, it's like steps, okay? It's like first they do things, and then after that they look at the to-do list and find, oh, there's not much I can do, and I don't really feel like asking for help, or whatever. So
Story of my
then
life.
they don't know what to do. Then after they don't know what to do, they stop doing things completely. But they still visit the Google Doc. They still visit the Google Doc to chat, because we have a almost daily chat of what's going on the site. So they still chat, but they don't do anything. And then after that, the final phase is that they completely disappear without even saying anything. That's the most frustrating thing.
Once
They
again,
just
story of my
literally,
life.
dude, they just disappear.
Really?
It is
now?
true.
Frustrating.
That's awful.
I've seen
get all
it
these
happen
new
twice
staff.
in my short time at the BMP.
What are they?
To get all these new staff, and you tell them,
Ascar
okay,
900,
this
BioMediaProject.
this is a demanding position. This is not something that everyone can do. If you join us, it is because you are joining us because you want to help us reach our goals. You want to help further Bionicle. It is you that is the person that wants to work on this stuff. It's not because I'm telling you what to do. I almost never tell people what to do. I just don't like to do it. So that's how it is. And if you can't do a job where you have to work independently without someone telling you what to do, then you're probably going to leave. So that's how it is now, and that's how it's always been, and it's continuous. It never stops. At any given time, there's probably 1 or 2 people undergoing this process. It has never stopped. So it's frustrating because I tell people when they join, this is what usually happens, and this is something that you need to be self-motivated to do, and it still happens. So I'm guessing that unless you're self-motivated, it's going to happen eventually, and you can't avoid it. So that's our staff issue. It's deeper than not having enough staff,
Yeah,
but it's
and
true
I
that
think
we
that-
don't have staff.
I think when people go to school, they don't have a lot of time to contribute.
That sounds like the
That happens.
common theme with most of the projects or groups
Yes.
in the Bionicle community. It's always
I
happens.
wonder if BSO1 has this problem. I know they have a lot of former staff too, but if you look at our list,
I'm sure they do.
our former staff is larger than our current staff, as it should be.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating when people join and they say that they're interested, but they don't even complete one thing. So in order for us to get to know them and things, we need to see some of their work. But if they don't do that, then they won't even get one thing done, and then they just go off and they're not interested anymore. So besides the staff issue, we're looking at what we could do in the future for this site, right? So after getting some staff members that actually stayed, and those staff members that have stayed so far are Greg 204, we've got Ben, we've got Fastcar 100. I'm not so sure about Fastcar 900 anymore.
No, he's gone. I'm telling you.
Too
Yeah,
fast.
see,
Fastcar
Ben's-
800 says it's gone.
Ben's calling it before I'm even calling it.
Wait, so there are
So-
2 fast cars? What?
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
brothers.
Oh,
They are brothers
Yeah.
apparently.
Even
yeah.
Fastcar 800 says Fastcar 900 is gone.
Yeah,
those are
so,
the 2 most interesting name selections ever. It's interesting enough to name yourself Fast Car. Your sibling 100 numbers high. Yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah, so the other staff that we had stay on were Chairborne Tanker, who is our forum moderator for the Serials Forum. I don't know why we have a forum moderator for only the Serials Forum, but
Should be a global
that's how
mod.
it is, and that's how it
We have
is,
no
right?
global mods now.
Yeah,
Bumblebee's
that's right.
gone.
Bumblebee.
I was a
used-
global mod at first, but
Yeah,
anyway.
Bumblebee used to be our global mod, but then he also succumbed to BMP disappearing syndrome
He came back a few weeks ago.
a few weeks ago.
Yeah, he was
I don't
on the Google Doc.
He
Very
was-
briefly.
it says the last time he's updated on the Google Doc is wow, it's from February. So he hasn't updated on the Google Doc even if he has visited. And we also have Hakan and Mako. Mako joined recently. Mako's kind of interesting, you know. Mako, he has hands in a lot of people's pockets. And the reason I say this is because he's on the staff of like pretty much every site. He's on BSO1. He's on various wikis, like more wikis than I can remember. And now he's joined us. So I don't know how much time he's going to dedicate to us, but you know, he has influence. I think he said he's the president of Kanoi Power. That's a huge position too, because
Wait a second.
Kanoi
The
Power-
president of
Kanoi Journal, you
Kanoi
mean.
Power?
or sorry, not Kanoi Power. I'm mixing things up. It's Kanoi Journal. Kanoi
Wait.
Journal.
Hold it. I have to interject here. Does he mean to say Kanohi Journal is currently still living?
It's
I'll talk about that in a sec. Kanoi
Okay.
Journal is pretty interesting. Okay.
Talk about
so,
that when we splice the video, which by
so-
the way
Infrared
has
says
to
it
be
may
done
be
pretty
alive.
soon.
So we decided to join Kanoi Journal in affiliation when we were. When did we create that affiliation? I think it was like 2010, and that was during the BMP 4.0 days. So that was with Drupal, and the reason why we did that is because we wanted to bring more visitors to the site. And I really appreciate that BioRan23 gave us a hand because they brought a lot of traffic to our site, and they gave us credibility. They gave us the credibility that we needed in order for people to acknowledge us as, you know, a serious effort and not just some noobs messing around on the internet or something. So
Well, I am very
After that-
happy that your affiliation with them ended better than ours did. I'm
So
very
after
happy.
our affiliation with them, it was interesting because BioRan23 and Plast and Kanoi Journal, those guys, they do everything very seriously. They treat it like a company, which I think it is. BioRan used to be the CEO. I'm not sure if he still is, but they had all the official, you know, board of directors titles. So they did everything seriously. They wrote up a legitimate contract for us for the affiliation, and the terms were fine to us. So we said okay, but we never actually ended up interacting or communicating on any of those defined terms of the contract. So, you know, I guess they just ended up helping us out. But I think they posted maybe 1 to 3 updates of the site, and I really appreciate that from them because they did that of their own accord. They didn't ask us, okay, give me something to paste into the text editor and press, you know, save. They actually looked at what we were doing, and they told the public on their site what events were going on. I thought that was really cool of them, right? Because we hadn't received any news or any other features that they wanted us to put up. That was part of the contract between the two of us.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool. And so BioRan23 and the Kanoi Journal guys became our friends. They're our closest friends in terms of organizations. We don't really have another affiliate at the moment. BZ Power is kind of interesting with this.
I suppose you
So-
would consider Spheres Magazine.
so- In the early days, like 2002 to 2005, BSO1 had a huge following. It was bigger than it was now, literally. So BC Power became impressed, and as I said earlier on, they decided to host BSO1. And due to that, they eventually affiliated with them. And from what I know, that is the only affiliation that they have ever done. BC Power, I mean. I don't think they will ever do one again. I think Biosector 01 took that opportunity when they saw it to affiliate with the biggest BioMediaProject site, and that they used that to boost their own site, right? Because it was the biggest, it was going to drive them more traffic. So we didn't really have that sort of opportunity because at that time, the things that we were doing, BZ Power wasn't really interested. And in 2012, we added forums. So in 2012, we were thinking about adding forums because BZ Power was going offline very frequently, And Easy Power's rules were starting to get a bit too much to us because we didn't like how we couldn't link to certain things and all that stuff. They used to have this rule where no matter how many links deep, you could not link to YouTube.
Yeah.
That was a problem for us because at that time we never did this, but at the time we were considering using YouTube for streaming video because everyone goes there.
Yeah.
So we ended up thinking, okay, we can't do this. These rules are too restrictive. So let's make our own forum, and we don't need BC Power anymore. We're not going to depend on BC Power for links.
Amen.
If they want us out because we have a forum, then so be it.
Yeah.
Down with those punks.
I approve of that mindset. That's
big
pretty much what we did.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we decided to get our own forums because of those two issues: the server being constantly offline due to hacks and simply being busy, as well as the rules.
Yeah.
And our forums, they're small and we don't have a lot of people, but they fulfill their purpose, which is to create an alternative place for discussion and also to discuss all the stuff we have on our site.
And to connect with our fans, like BioMediaProject fans.
Yeah. Some people have told me, oh, your forums are too small. You're never going to get anywhere. What's the point? And to that,
You're not supposed to get anywhere, though.
After today, it'll skyrocket now.
Yeah, you're right.
So those forums, in my opinion, I am not envisioning these forums to become enormously large.
Yeah.
That was not what I was thinking. I was thinking, okay, we just need a place to discuss. I don't care how big it is. The only thing that matters is that it persists through the site's history, so that we have a better place for discussion where we can develop and do all our stuff. It doesn't matter how big it is. It can be small, but it can still be good. A lot of the time when you visit the forum, it's only me there, or it's nobody there. I don't care. Okay, I don't care. All I care about is that we have a place for this stuff. So after we got our forum,
now I just want to interject. We're starting to get into interesting community-related topics and forums and other groups. BZP, Kadohi Journal. What do you say we slice apart? This was.
But
okay.
Teacher, I didn't put notes down. Could you repeat the whole thing?
Loudest wow, Ian.
Okay, so if you want to split into part 2 now?
Yeah, I would love to. And there's no need to stop any recordings, but let's just, I'll splice it myself.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I just want to get a defined place to start it up.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
We will see you.
joke.
We will see you in part 2, where we will continue this line of thought and actually ask some questions. See you then.
How do you like my lead-up joke? Took me a few hours.